used to tell you everything, every thought that crossed his mind, every worry that kept him awake at night, every dream he was afraid to speak out loud. And now, silence. Not the comfortable silence of two people who have grown so close they no longer need words. Not the peaceful quiet of a Sunday morning spent reading newspapers side by side. This is a different silence. This silence has weight. It presses against your chest when you lie in bed at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering what went wrong. It follows you through your day like a shadow you cannot shake. It echoes in every unanswered question, every conversation that never happens, every emotional door that remains firmly closed. You have asked him what is wrong. Nothing, he says. You have tried to create space for him to open up. He fills that space with more silence. You have wondered if you did something wrong, if you said something that pushed him away, if there is something fundamentally broken in you that makes the people you love eventually stop talking to you. And here is what I need you to understand before we go any further. His silence is not about your worth. His silence is not a reflection of your value as a woman, as a partner, as a human being worthy of love and connection. But his silence is telling you something important, something that could change the entire trajectory of your relationship, your self-understanding, and your future. And today, we are going to decode exactly what that silence is saying. Not the surface-level explanation, not the easy answer that lets everyone off the hook. The real truth, the uncomfortable truth, the truth that might be difficult to hear but will ultimately set you free. Because you did not come this far in life to spend your remaining years wondering, worrying, and walking on eggshells around someone who has chosen to communicate through absence rather than presence. You deserve answers, and today you are going to get them. Welcome back to the channel. If you are new here, I want you to know that this is a space dedicated to helping mature women navigate the complex landscape of modern relationships with wisdom, clarity, and unshakable self-worth. We do not do surface-level advice here. We do not offer quick fixes or empty platitudes that sound good but change nothing. We go deep. We examine patterns that have shaped your entire life. We uncover truths that have been hidden in plain sight. We give you the tools not just to understand your relationships, but to transform them. And if that sounds like what you have been searching for, I want to invite you right now to hit that subscribe button and click the notification bell so you never miss a video. We release new content regularly, and every single video is designed to give you insights that most people spend years and thousands of dollars in therapy trying to uncover. Also, if this video resonates with you, if it gives you that moment of clarity where suddenly everything makes sense, please take a moment to hit the like button. That simple action helps this video reach other women who are going through exactly what you are going through. Women who are lying awake at night, wondering why the man they love has stopped talking to them. Women who deserve to understand what is really happening in their relationships. Your like is not just a number to me. It is a way of saying that this content matters, that these conversations need to be happening, that women supporting women is how we all rise together. And if you find yourself wanting to share your own experience, please leave a comment below. Tell me what brought you here today. Tell me about the silence you have been experiencing. Tell me what questions are burning in your heart that you need answered. I read every single comment, and this community has become something truly special because of the wisdom and support you share with each other. When one woman shares her story, another woman reading it realizes she is not alone. And that realization, that moment of connection across screens and miles and different life circumstances, that is powerful beyond measure. So please share this video with a friend who needs to hear it. Share it on your social media, send it to your group chat, because chances are you know at least one other woman who is currently dealing with a silent partner and feeling completely lost about what to do. And for those of you who want to go above and beyond in supporting this channel and the work we do here, you can use the Super Thanks feature below this video. Your support directly enables me to continue creating this content, to keep researching the most current psychological insights, and to dedicate the time necessary to bring you the depth and quality you deserve. Every Super Thanks means more than I can express. It tells me that this work is making a real difference in your life, and that motivates me to keep showing up and giving you everything I have. Now, let us dive into today's topic, because this one is going to be unlike any conversation you have had about male silence before. We are going to explore this from every angle. We are going to examine the psychology, the patterns, the hidden meanings, and most importantly, what you can actually do with this information. By the end of this video, you will not just understand his silence, you will understand yourself more deeply than ever before, and that understanding is where real transformation begins. Part 1. The weight of unspoken words. There is a particular kind of loneliness that comes from sharing a life with someone who is physically present but emotionally absent. It is perhaps the cruelest form of loneliness because from the outside, everything looks fine. You have a partner, you have a home together, you have a life that appears complete, but inside, you are starving for connection. Inside, you are screaming into a void that never answers back. And the worst part is that you remember what it was like before. You remember when he would talk to you for hours, when he would share his fears and his dreams and his random thoughts about nothing important at all. You remember feeling chosen, feeling seen, feeling like the most important person in his world, and now you feel like a stranger living in your own home. Let me tell you something that might be difficult to hear. This feeling you are experiencing, this profound disconnection, despite physical proximity, is one of the most common experiences reported by mature women in long-term relationships. And yet, it is rarely talked about openly. There is shame attached to it. A sense that if you were a better partner, if you were more attractive, more interesting, more something, he would not have retreated into silence. But here is what you need to understand from the very beginning. His silence is not your shame to carry. His silence is information, and information, once properly understood, becomes power. The power to make informed decisions about your life, the power to protect your emotional well-being, the power to choose what you will and will not accept in your relationships. So let us begin by understanding what silence actually is in the context of an intimate relationship. Silence is communication. That might seem contradictory, but it is absolutely true. When someone chooses not to speak, they are still communicating. They are communicating through absence. They are communicating through what they withhold. And often, what is withheld carries more meaning than what is said. Think about it this way. If your partner came home and told you directly that he was unhappy, that he felt disconnected, that he was struggling with something he could not name, you would have something to work with. You could address the problem. You could seek solutions together. You could at least understand what you were dealing with. But silence gives you none of that. Silence leaves you guessing, wondering, filling in the blanks with your worst fears and deepest insecurities. And that is not an accident. Whether consciously or unconsciously, the person who uses silence as their primary mode of communication in a relationship is doing something very specific. They are maintaining control while avoiding vulnerability. They are keeping you off balance while protecting themselves from the discomfort of honest conversation. They are, in essence, having their cake and eating it too. They get to remain in the relationship, receiving whatever benefits that provides, while never having to engage with the messy, uncomfortable work of true intimacy. Now, I want to be very clear about something. I am not saying that every man who becomes silent in a relationship is deliberately manipulating you. Some are dealing with depression. Some are processing trauma. Some genuinely do not have the emotional vocabulary to express what they are experiencing. We will explore all of these possibilities in depth throughout this video. But regardless of the reason behind the silence, you need to understand one crucial thing. The impact on you is the same. Whether he is silent because he is emotionally immature, because he is hiding something, because he is checked out of the relationship, or because he genuinely does not know how to communicate his inner world, the effect on your nervous system, your self-esteem, and your quality of life is identical. And you deserve better than living in that constant state of uncertainty. You deserve a relationship where communication flows in both directions. You deserve to be with someone who chooses connection over avoidance. You deserve to know where you stand. So as we move through this video, I want you to hold on to that truth, not as a weapon against anyone else, but as an anchor for yourself. A reminder of your inherent worth and the kind of treatment you are entitled to expect from anyone who claims to love you. Part 2. The different types of silence. Not all silence is created equal, and one of the first steps in understanding what his silence is truly saying is learning to distinguish between different types of silence, because the response you need and the meaning you should take from the silence varies dramatically depending on which type you are dealing with. Let us begin with what I call processing silence. This is the silence that occurs when someone is genuinely trying to work through complex emotions or thoughts before speaking. Some people, and this is more common in men due to both biological factors and socialization, need time and space to understand their own internal experiences before they can articulate them to others. Processing silence usually has certain characteristics. It tends to be temporary, lasting hours or maybe a day or two rather than weeks or months. The person experiencing it will often acknowledge that they need time to think, even if they cannot explain exactly what they are thinking about. They remain engaged in other aspects of the relationship. They might be quiet about one specific topic but still present and connected in daily life. And crucially, processing silence ends. At some point, the person comes back with thoughts, feelings, or at least an acknowledgement that they have been processing something. If your partner is experiencing processing silence, the best thing you can do is respect the space while gently keeping the door open for conversation when they are ready. This type of silence, while uncomfortable, is not necessarily a red flag. It can actually be a sign of emotional maturity, someone who wants to respond thoughtfully rather than reactively. The second type is protective silence. This is the silence that emerges when someone feels unsafe to share their authentic thoughts and feelings. Perhaps they have been criticized or dismissed when they have opened up in the past. Perhaps they grew up in an environment where emotional expression was punished. Perhaps there is something in your relationship dynamic that makes vulnerability feel risky. Protective silence often looks like emotional withdrawal that corresponds to specific topics or situations. He might be perfectly communicative about surface-level things but shut down completely when deeper emotions are involved. He might become silent after conflict or when difficult topics are raised. He might seem afraid of your reaction to his authentic thoughts and feelings. This type of silence requires a different response. It requires examining the safety of your relationship environment. Have you, perhaps unintentionally, responded to his vulnerability in ways that might have felt dismissive or critical? Is there a pattern where his attempts to communicate have been met with anger, tears, or other responses that might feel overwhelming to him? I want to be clear that I am not blaming you for his silence. You are not responsible for his emotional limitations. But if protective silence is what you are dealing with, understanding the dynamics that contribute to it can help you create an environment where he might eventually feel safe enough to open up. The third type, and this is where things get more concerning, is avoidant silence. Avoidant silence is not about processing or protection. It is about escape. Someone engaging in avoidant silence has essentially checked out of the emotional aspect of the relationship. They have decided, consciously or unconsciously, that engaging with the discomfort of honest communication is not worth the effort. This type of silence tends to be pervasive rather than situational. The person is generally disconnected, not just quiet about specific topics. It often coexists with other forms of emotional distance, such as decreased physical affection, less interest in your life, or a general sense that they are going through the motions of the relationship without real investment. And perhaps most tellingly, avoidant silence tends to be chronic. It does not resolve on its own. It often gets worse over time rather than better. If you are dealing with avoidant silence, you are facing a more serious situation. This type of silence is often a precursor to the end of a relationship, or it is a signal that the relationship has already ended emotionally, even if both people are still physically present. The fourth type is punitive silence. This is silence used as a weapon. Punitive silence, also known as stonewalling or the silent treatment, is a form of emotional manipulation where silence is deliberately deployed to punish, control, or hurt the other person. The characteristics of punitive silence are distinctive. It typically begins immediately after a conflict or after you have done something that displeased your partner. It has a quality of deliberateness. You can feel that the silence is intentional, meant to make you suffer. The person engaging in punitive silence often shows subtle signs of satisfaction or superiority while you are clearly in distress. And the silence ends only when you have sufficiently apologized, capitulated, or otherwise met their unstated demands. This type of silence is a form of emotional abuse. I do not use that term lightly, but punitive silence is recognized by relationship experts and mental health professionals as a destructive pattern that causes significant psychological harm to the recipient. If you are experiencing punitive silence regularly in your relationship, this is a serious red flag that should not be ignored. The fifth type is what I call empty silence. This is perhaps the saddest type of silence because it represents not manipulation or protection or processing, but simply the absence of anything to say. Empty silence occurs in relationships where the connection has faded so completely that there is genuinely nothing left to communicate about. The two people have become like roommates who share a space, but share nothing else. There is no conflict driving the silence because there is not enough engagement for conflict to arise. There is no protection because neither person feels invested enough to feel vulnerable. There is just nothing. Empty silence is characterized by mutual disengagement. It is not that one person has withdrawn while the other seeks connection. Both people have retreated into their separate worlds. Conversations are purely functional, about household logistics, schedules, practical matters. There is no fighting, but also no making up, no tension, but also no passion, no conflict, but also no intimacy. If you recognize your relationship in this description, you are facing a choice about whether the relationship can be resurrected or whether it has run its course. Now that we have mapped out these different types of silence, I want you to take a moment to reflect. Which type or types are you experiencing in your relationship? Be honest with yourself. The answer matters because it will shape everything that comes next. And remember, as we continue through this video, we will be exploring each of these types in more depth and discussing what they truly mean about you, about him, and about your relationship. Part 3. What his silence actually reveals about him. Let us shift our focus now from categorizing the silence to understanding what it reveals about the man who is silent. Because his silence is not a mystery that appeared out of nowhere. It is the external manifestation of internal processes, patterns, and choices. And understanding those internal elements is crucial if you want to see the full picture of your situation. The first thing his silence might reveal is his attachment style. Attachment theory, originally developed by psychologist John Bowlby and later expanded by researchers like Mary Ainsworth and Cindy Hazan, gives us a powerful framework for understanding how people relate to intimacy and connection. There are 4 primary attachment styles: secure, anxious, avoidant, and disorganized. If your partner has an avoidant attachment style, silence may be his default response to emotional intimacy. People with avoidant attachment learned early in life that depending on others was unsafe. Perhaps their caregivers were unavailable, dismissive, or unpredictable. As a result, they developed strategies to protect themselves from the pain of unmet needs. They learned to suppress their desire for connection, to maintain emotional distance, and to rely only on themselves. In adult relationships, this manifests as discomfort with closeness, a tendency to withdraw when things get emotionally intense, and difficulty expressing needs or feelings. The avoidant person is not being silent to hurt you. They are being silent because their nervous system genuinely experiences intimacy as threatening. When you move toward connection, their internal alarm system goes off. They feel overwhelmed, engulfed, or trapped, and silence becomes their escape hatch, their way of creating the distance their nervous system desperately craves. This is not an excuse for the behavior. Understanding why someone does something does not mean you have to accept its impact on your life. But it does give you important information. If your partner has an avoidant attachment style, his silence is not a reflection of your unworthiness. It is a reflection of his deep-seated fear of the very intimacy you are offering. And changing this pattern requires his willingness to confront those fears, often with professional help. It is not something you can fix by loving him harder or being more patient. The second thing his silence might reveal is his emotional intelligence, or lack thereof. Emotional intelligence refers to the ability to recognize, understand, and manage one's own emotions, as well as to recognize, understand, and influence the emotions of others. Some people, and again, this is more common in men due to how boys are typically socialized, reach adulthood with severely limited emotional intelligence. They may have trouble identifying what they are feeling. They may lack the vocabulary to express emotions beyond basic categories like anger or happiness. They may be disconnected from their emotional experience entirely, living almost exclusively in their heads rather than their hearts. For someone with low emotional intelligence, silence is not a choice, so much as a limitation. They are not choosing not to share their feelings with you. They genuinely do not have access to those feelings in a way that would allow them to be shared. Ask them what they are feeling, and they are not lying when they say they do not know. They literally do not know. Their emotional awareness is like a muscle that was never developed. This can be incredibly frustrating for you as a partner who wants emotional connection. You keep reaching out and hitting a wall, not realizing that the wall is not there to keep you out, but rather because no doorway was ever built. The good news is that emotional intelligence can be developed at any age. The brain remains plastic throughout life, and with intention and effort, people can learn to access and express their emotions more fully. But here is the crucial point. He has to want to develop it. You cannot want it for him. You cannot do the work for him. You cannot force emotional growth on another person, no matter how much you love them. The third thing his silence might reveal is his level of investment in the relationship. This is perhaps the hardest possibility to consider, But we must be honest. Sometimes silence means exactly what it appears to mean. It means that he has stopped investing in the relationship. It means that he has emotionally left, even if he is still physically present. There are many reasons why someone might disinvest from a relationship while staying in it. Fear of being alone, financial entanglement, children, convenience, fear of the disruption that leaving would cause. But whatever the reason, the silence of disinvestment has a particular quality. It is not conflicted. He is not torn between wanting to connect and being afraid to. He has simply stopped wanting to. The relationship has become, for him, a structure he lives within, rather than a connection he nurtures. He goes through the motions. He does the minimum. But the fire that once animated his participation in the relationship has gone out. If this is what his silence reveals, you are facing a painful reality. You cannot make someone want to be with you. You cannot love someone into investing in you if they have decided not to. All you can do is recognize the truth of your situation and make decisions that honor your own worth and well-being. The fourth thing his silence might reveal is that he is hiding something. Sometimes silence is not about processing or protection or limitation or disinvestment. Sometimes silence is about secrecy. He is quiet because there are things he does not want you to know. An affair, a hidden addiction, financial problems he has been concealing, a double life you know nothing about. The silence of secrecy often has a quality of anxiety to it. He seems nervous rather than merely withdrawn. He is protective of his phone, his computer, his private spaces. His story does not quite add up when you pay close attention, and when you ask questions, his silence is accompanied by deflection, irritation, or attempts to make you feel crazy for being curious. If you suspect that his silence is hiding something, trust your instincts. Women are frequently gaslit into ignoring the warning signs that were there all along. You are told you are being paranoid, insecure, controlling, but your instincts evolved over millions of years to protect you. They pick up on subtle cues that your conscious mind might not even register. If something feels wrong, it probably is. The fifth thing his silence might reveal is that he is struggling with his mental health. Depression, anxiety, and other mental health conditions can dramatically affect someone's ability to communicate. Depression, in particular, can create a kind of internal silence where everything feels muffled and distant, including the desire to connect with loved ones. Someone experiencing depression might withdraw, not because they want to, but because they cannot muster the energy for engagement. The illness itself creates a barrier between them and the world. If your partner's silence is accompanied by other signs of depression, such as changes in sleep or appetite, loss of interest in activities he used to enjoy, persistent sadness or emptiness, or expressions of hopelessness, mental health may be a significant factor. This does not mean you should diagnose him or that his mental health struggles excuse harmful behavior toward you, but it does mean that the situation may require professional intervention rather than simply better communication between the two of you. The sixth thing his silence might reveal is his level of respect for you. I want you to really hear this one because it cuts to the heart of what his silence means about you. When someone respects their partner, they understand that communication is a fundamental aspect of a healthy relationship. They might struggle with it, they might not be perfect at it, but they recognize that shutting their partner out is not acceptable. When someone does not respect their partner, they feel entitled to withhold communication without regard for how it affects the other person. They do not feel obligated to explain themselves. They do not feel accountable for the emotional impact of their silence. Your distress in the face of their withdrawal is your problem, not theirs. His silence, if it is chronic and unaddressed and unapologetic, may be revealing that on some level, he does not respect you enough to engage with you as a full partner. He sees you as someone whose needs can be ignored, someone whose emotional well-being is less important than his comfort, someone he does not have to show up for. This is a deeply painful thing to recognize about someone you love, but it is better to see the truth than to spend years trying to earn the respect of someone who has already decided you do not deserve it. You deserve a partner who respects you enough to communicate with you, even when it is hard. You deserve someone who understands that relationship means relating, and relating requires words, honesty, and engagement. If his silence reveals a lack of respect, that is information you need in order to make decisions about your own life. Part 4. What his silence is truly saying about you. Now, we come to the core question that brought you here today. What is his silence saying about you? I am going to answer this question from multiple angles because the complete answer is more nuanced than any single statement could capture. Let us start with the most important truth. His silence says nothing about your inherent worth. Nothing. Your value as a human being is not determined by how much someone else chooses to communicate with you. I know that in the depths of this experience, it can feel like his silence is a verdict on you, a judgment that you are not interesting enough, attractive enough, lovable enough to warrant his words. But that feeling, as real and painful as it is a lie. His silence is about him. It reflects his capacities, his choices, his limitations, his patterns. It is not a mirror of your worth. It is a window into his character. When you confuse the two, when you take his silence as evidence of your unworthiness, you are doing something that humans often do, but that is not logical. You are making yourself responsible for another person's choices. You are assuming that if you were just different in some way, if you were better in some way, he would behave differently. But that assumption gives you both too much credit and not enough. Too much credit because it imagines you have the power to control another person's behavior through your own worthiness. Not enough credit because it fails to recognize that you already are worthy, exactly as you are, of a partner who shows up and communicates. So the first thing his silence is truly saying about you is precisely nothing about your inherent value. But there are other things his silence may be revealing. It may be revealing what you have been tolerating. One of the patterns I see repeatedly in women who come to me with this issue is a history of accepting less than they deserve. Not because they are weak or foolish or lacking in some way, but because they were taught through culture, through family, through painful experience that their needs were not priorities. They were taught to put others first, to keep the peace, to not make waves, to be grateful for whatever crumbs of connection they received. And so they tolerated small silences that grew into larger ones. They accepted excuses and explanations that did not quite make sense. They told themselves that this was just how men are, that they should not expect too much, that relationships are hard. If you recognize yourself in this pattern, his silence is holding up a mirror not to your worth, but to your tolerance. It is showing you what you have been willing to accept. And perhaps it is inviting you to ask whether that tolerance is serving you or harming you. His silence may also be revealing your fears. The intensity of your response to his silence often corresponds to the depth of your fears about relationships and connection. If his silence sends you into a spiral of panic, if it triggers anxiety that seems disproportionate to the situation, if you cannot function because you are so consumed by trying to figure out what is happening, this may be telling you something important about yourself. Perhaps you have fears of abandonment that predate this relationship. Perhaps you have experienced traumatic losses or rejections that left deep wounds. Perhaps your sense of security is too tied to another person's behavior. None of this is your fault. We do not choose our fears or the experiences that created them, but recognizing them is the first step toward healing them. His silence, painful as it is may be an invitation to explore your own relationship with security, attachment, and self-worth. It may be revealing patterns in you that, once understood and addressed, will transform not just this relationship, but every relationship you have. His silence may also be revealing your needs. Sometimes we do not fully understand what we need until we experience its absence. His silence is showing you, in sharp relief, exactly how much you need connection, communication, and emotional intimacy. It is clarifying your values. It is defining your non-negotiables. It is drawing a line around the minimum requirements for your happiness in a relationship. This is valuable information. Too many people go through life without a clear sense of what they actually need in a relationship. They accept whatever they get and try to make themselves okay with it. But his silence is forcing you to confront the reality that you need more than this. You need words. You need engagement. You need a partner who is present. There is no shame in having needs. You are human. Humans are social creatures who require connection to thrive. His silence is simply helping you articulate, perhaps for the first time clearly, what kind of connection you require. His silence may also be revealing your strength, because here is something remarkable about you. You are still here. You are seeking understanding. You are trying to make sense of a difficult situation. You are reaching for tools and insights that might help. That takes strength. A weaker person might have given up entirely, might have numbed out, might have pretended the problem did not exist, but you are facing it. His silence is revealing that you are someone who confronts difficulties rather than running from them. Someone who seeks growth even when growth is painful. Someone who values truth enough to pursue it even when the truth might hurt. That is not nothing. That is actually everything. It means that whatever happens with this relationship, you will be okay. Because the qualities that are allowing you to engage with this content, your courage, your resilience, your commitment to understanding, those qualities will carry you through whatever comes next. Finally, his silence may be revealing that you are at a crossroads. There are moments in life when we are forced to make significant decisions. Moments when we can no longer continue on autopilot, when we must choose a direction. His silence may be creating exactly such a moment for you. It is forcing you to ask questions you have been avoiding. It is making it impossible to pretend that everything is fine. It is demanding that you take a real look at your relationship and decide what you are willing to accept. This is uncomfortable. Nobody welcomes being at a crossroads. But it is also an opportunity, because at a crossroads, change becomes possible. At a crossroads, you have the power to choose a different path. His silence, for all the pain it causes, may be the catalyst for a transformation in your life that has been waiting to happen. Part 5. The Psychology of Male Silence. To fully understand what his silence means, we need to explore the psychological landscape that produces it. Why do so many men default to silence when emotional engagement is required? The answer is complex and rooted in both nature and nurture. Let us start with the neurobiological piece. Research has shown that male and female brains process emotions somewhat differently. When faced with intense emotion, the male brain is more likely to activate the fight-or-flight response. The limbic system, the emotional center of the brain, becomes highly active, but instead of leading to emotional expression, this activation often leads to withdrawal. This is sometimes called flooding. When a man becomes emotionally flooded, his capacity for verbal communication actually decreases. The thinking brain, the prefrontal cortex, essentially goes offline as the survival brain takes over. From an evolutionary perspective, this makes a certain kind of sense. When ancestral men faced threats, the appropriate response was often action rather than discussion. The males who survived were those who could quickly move into a mode of silent, focused alertness. But in the context of modern relationships, This biological tendency can be profoundly problematic. When you want to talk, when you are seeking connection and understanding, his nervous system may be interpreting the emotional intensity as a threat, and his automatic response to threat is to shut down and withdraw. This is not an excuse. Understanding biology does not mean accepting harmful behavior, but it does help explain why so many men across cultures and throughout history have struggled with emotional communication in exactly this way. Now let us add the socialization piece. From the moment they are born, boys receive messages about what it means to be male. They are told, directly and indirectly, that real men are stoic, that showing emotion is weakness, that talking about feelings is for girls. They are praised for toughness and mocked for sensitivity. They are taught to compete rather than connect. They are encouraged to solve problems rather than share them. By the time they reach adulthood, many men have internalized these messages so deeply that they no longer recognize them as external programming. They genuinely believe that they should not need to talk about their feelings. They genuinely feel uncomfortable, even ashamed, when emotional expression is required. They have, in effect, been trained for silence. This training does not end in childhood. It continues throughout adult life, in the workplace, in male friendships, and often within romantic relationships themselves. A man who tries to express vulnerability is often met with discomfort, even from people who claim to want him to open up. His partner may say she wants him to share his feelings, but when he does, she becomes critical or dismissive. His friends may encourage talking about problems, but when he tries, they change the subject or make a joke. These experiences reinforce the lesson that silence is safer. Over time, the capacity for emotional expression may actually atrophy. Like any skill, it degrades without practice. A man who has spent decades avoiding emotional communication may find that he genuinely does not know how to do it anymore. This brings us to an important point about change. If your partner's silence is rooted in biology and reinforced by decades of socialization, it is not going to change easily or quickly. It is certainly not going to change just because you want it to. Meaningful change requires, first, his recognition that his silence is a problem. Second, his genuine desire to change. Third, his willingness to do the work required, often including therapy. Without all three of these elements, significant change is unlikely. And here is the difficult truth. You cannot create any of these three elements for him. You cannot make him see the problem if he does not see it. You cannot manufacture desire for change. You cannot do his therapeutic work. All you can do is be clear about your needs, set boundaries around what you will accept, and let him respond to those boundaries however he chooses. There is another psychological factor worth exploring, and that is the role of power and control. In some cases, male silence is not about limitation or fear or socialization. It is about maintaining a particular kind of power in the relationship. Silence can be a very effective way of controlling a relational dynamic. When he is silent, you are the one pursuing. You are the one trying to figure out what is wrong. You are the one adjusting your behavior in an attempt to get him to engage. This dynamic places him in a position of power. He holds the keys to connection. He decides when and if communication will happen. Some men learn, consciously or unconsciously, that silence gives them leverage. It keeps their partner off balance. It ensures that the relationship operates on their terms. If this is what is happening in your relationship, the silence is a form of manipulation rather than limitation. It is worth noting that people who use silence for control often combine it with intermittent reinforcement. That is, they do occasionally engage, talk, and connect. But the timing of their engagement is unpredictable. You never know when you will get the connected, communicative version of them. This unpredictability is actually what makes the pattern so powerful. Research on operant conditioning shows that intermittent reinforcement creates the strongest behavioral patterns. When a reward is unpredictable, the subject becomes more, not less, invested in seeking it. If he occasionally breaks his silence, if he sometimes gives you the connection you crave, you become like a gambler who keeps pulling the lever because the last win was just big enough to make the losses seem worthwhile. Recognizing this pattern is crucial because it helps you understand why you might be so attached to someone who gives you so little. It is not because of your weakness or neediness. It is because of how your brain is wired to respond to intermittent reinforcement. Finally, let us consider the psychology of what is called emotional withdrawal. Emotional withdrawal is a defense mechanism that allows a person to remain in a relationship physically while protecting themselves from its emotional risks. For the person withdrawing, this feels like survival. They are keeping themselves safe from the perceived dangers of intimacy, vulnerability, and connection. But for the partner of someone in emotional withdrawal, the experience is one of constant rejection. Every attempt at connection is met with a wall. Every bid for intimacy is declined. Over time, this pattern can create something called rejection sensitivity. If you have experienced chronic emotional withdrawal from your partner, you may have become hyper-attuned to any signs of rejection or distance. You may interpret neutral behaviors as evidence of his disengagement. You may become anxious at the slightest suggestion that he is pulling away. You may find yourself constantly scanning for evidence that the rejection you fear is happening. This is not paranoia, it is an adaptation to an environment of chronic emotional scarcity. Your nervous system has learned that connection is unreliable, and so it stays vigilant against the threat of abandonment. Understanding this can help you be more compassionate with yourself. The anxiety you feel is not weakness. It is a rational response to an irrational situation. A situation where you are trying to have a relationship with someone who has made themselves unavailable for one. Part 6. The stories we tell ourselves. When faced with his silence, you do not simply experience the absence of words. You fill that absence with stories. Your mind, desperate for meaning and explanation, creates narratives to make sense of what is happening. And these stories, more than the silence itself, may be what is causing you the most pain. Let us examine some of the stories that women commonly tell themselves in the face of a silent partner. Story 1. If I were good enough, he would talk to me. This story links your worthiness to his behavior. It assumes that his silence is a response to something lacking in you, and that if you could just figure out what that lacking is and fix it, he would suddenly become communicative. This story keeps you focused on self-improvement as a solution to a problem that is not actually about you. You try to be more attractive, more interesting, more agreeable. You contort yourself into different shapes, hoping to find the one that finally earns his words. But here is the truth. His silence is not a puzzle that the right version of you could solve. It is not a test that you could pass if you were just better in some way. His silence is his choice, rooted in his patterns, his limitations, and his relationship with himself. You could be the most extraordinary woman in the world, and he would still be silent, because his silence is not about you. Story 2. He is going through something difficult and needs my patience. This story casts you as the supportive partner who just needs to wait things out. It assumes that his silence is temporary, caused by some external or internal difficulty that will eventually pass. Sometimes this story is true. Sometimes people do go through difficult periods that affect their communication. But when this story is used as a chronic explanation for chronic silence, it becomes a way of excusing the inexcusable. It allows you to avoid confronting the reality that his silence is not a phase, but a pattern. Not an exception, but a rule. If you have been telling yourself this story for months or years, it is time to ask whether the difficult period is ever going to end, or whether you are using hope as a way of avoiding the pain of seeing clearly. Story 3. If I just knew the right thing to say or do, I could fix this. This story puts the responsibility for fixing the relationship entirely on your shoulders. It assumes that there is some magic key that would unlock his communication, and you just have not found it yet. So you try different approaches, you ask questions, you give him space, you write letters, you try to create the perfect conditions for him to feel safe opening up. And when none of it works, you blame yourself for not having the right key. But here is what this story ignores. It takes two people to create connection in a relationship. No matter how skilled you are at communication, no matter how perfectly you phrase your questions, no matter how safe you make the environment, he still has to choose to engage. His silence is not a lock that you can pick if you are clever enough. It is a door that only he can open from the inside. Story 4. This is just how men are. This story normalizes his silence by suggesting that all men are like this. It tells you that you should lower your expectations because what you are experiencing is universal. This story is particularly insidious because there is a grain of truth in it. Men, on average, are often less verbally expressive about emotions than women. But on average does not mean inevitably. There are plenty of men who are capable of emotional communication, men who have done the work to develop this capacity, men who understand that a relationship requires words and choose to show up with them. When you tell yourself that this is just how men are, you erase these men from your field of vision. You convince yourself that you are asking for something impossible. But you are not asking for the impossible. You are asking for a basic requirement of a healthy relationship. Story 5. I must have done something to cause this. This story goes beyond saying that you are not good enough. It accuses you of actively doing something wrong that caused him to withdraw. Maybe you were too needy. Maybe you were too independent. Maybe you pushed too hard. Maybe you did not push enough. You review every interaction, looking for the moment where you made the mistake that caused him to go silent. But this story keeps you trapped in a cycle of self-blame that prevents you from seeing the situation clearly. Even if there was something you did that he is responding to, his response of silence is still his choice. A mature partner would talk to you about what upset them. They would give you the opportunity to understand and address the issue. Choosing silence over communication is not something you caused. It is something he chose. Story 6. If I leave, I will be alone forever. This is perhaps the most powerful story that keeps women trapped in relationships with silent partners. The fear of being alone, especially for older women, can be overwhelming. You may feel that your options are limited, that you are lucky to have anyone at all, that a silent partner is better than no partner. This story keeps you accepting crumbs when you deserve a feast. But let me offer you a different perspective. Being alone is not the same as being lonely, and being with someone who refuses to communicate with you is one of the loneliest experiences a person can have. If you left this relationship, yes, you would be physically alone, but you would also be free from the particular torment of trying to connect with someone who is not available. You would have the opportunity to build a life that is rich with connection, even without a romantic partner, and you would leave space for the possibility of meeting someone who is actually capable of the kind of relationship you desire. The fear of being alone keeps many women in relationships that are slowly eroding their spirit. Do not let it keep you. These stories we tell ourselves are powerful. They shape our reality. They determine what we see and what we miss. Becoming aware of the stories you have been telling yourself is the first step toward questioning them. And when you question them, you create space for different stories. Stories where your worth is not dependent on his behavior. Stories where you have power and choice. Stories where a different future is possible. Part 7. The impact of chronic silence on you. We have spent a lot of time understanding his silence. Now let us talk about what that silence is doing to you. Because whether or not his silence is intentional, whether or not it is a reflection of your worth, it is still impacting you in profound ways, and that impact deserves to be named and addressed. The first impact is on your nervous system. Human beings are wired for connection. When we perceive a threat to our social bonds, our nervous system responds as if we are in physical danger. His silence triggers your threat detection system over and over again. Every time you try to connect and are met with nothing, your amygdala, the fear center of your brain, registers a threat. Stress hormones are released. Your body prepares for danger. Over time, this chronic activation takes a serious toll. You may experience persistent anxiety that seems to have no specific cause, difficulty sleeping, physical symptoms like headaches, digestive issues, or muscle tension, a constant feeling of being on edge. This is not weakness. This is your body doing exactly what it is designed to do in the face of a perceived threat. But your body cannot distinguish between a saber-toothed tiger and a partner who will not speak to you. It responds to both as danger. The second impact is on your self-esteem. When we are in relationship with someone, we use their responses to us as a mirror. We look to them for information about who we are. When your partner is silent, that mirror reflects nothing back. Or worse, it reflects the message that you are not worth responding to. Over time, you may start to internalize this message. You may begin to believe that you really are uninteresting, undesirable, or unworthy of engagement. Your self-talk may become increasingly negative. You may find yourself criticizing yourself, doubting yourself, and second-guessing your perceptions. This erosion of self-esteem can be subtle. It happens gradually, one silent day at a time, but over months and years, the cumulative effect can be devastating. The third impact is on your ability to trust yourself. One of the most insidious effects of living with someone who uses silence to communicate is that it makes you question your own reality. When he denies that anything is wrong, when he acts as if the silence is normal and your concerns are overblown, you start to doubt your own perceptions. Maybe I am making something out of nothing, you think. Maybe I am too sensitive. Maybe I am the problem. This kind of reality distortion, when maintained over time, can cause you to lose touch with your own inner knowing. You may find yourself unable to make decisions because you no longer trust your judgment. You may dismiss your feelings as unreliable. You may seek constant external validation because your internal compass no longer seems trustworthy. This is a form of gaslighting, even if it is not intentional. When someone's behavior consistently contradicts your reality without any acknowledgement that the contradiction exists, it can make you feel like you are losing your mind. The fourth impact is on your capacity for joy. Living with chronic silence is exhausting. The constant vigilance, the never-ending attempts to decode meaning, the perpetual disappointment of reaching out and finding no one there. It drains your energy and dims your light. You may find that things that used to bring you pleasure no longer do, that you go through the motions of life without really feeling alive. That joy has become a distant memory rather than a present experience. This is not depression, though it can look like it. It is a natural response to living in an environment that is chronically depleting you. When a flower does not get enough water and sunlight, it wilts. When a human does not get enough connection and communication, the same thing happens. The fifth impact is on your other relationships. The patterns we develop in one relationship have a way of bleeding into our other relationships. Living with a silent partner can affect how you show up with friends, family, and coworkers. You may become more anxious in your communications with others, constantly worried about whether you have said the right thing. You may become more withdrawn yourself, unconsciously mirroring the behavior you experience at home. Or you may go the other direction, becoming overly talkative and needy in your other relationships, as you try to get the connection you are missing at home. Either way, his silence is not contained to your relationship with him. It radiates outward, affecting your entire social world. The sixth impact is on your future. Perhaps most significantly, living with chronic silence affects how you envision your future. When you are trapped in the day-to-day reality of trying to connect with someone who is not available, it becomes hard to imagine anything different. Your world shrinks to the size of this problem. Your future contracts to a series of more days like this one. Hope fades. Dreams are abandoned. The vibrant future self you once imagined becomes increasingly unreal. This is what chronic silence steals from you. Not just present connection, but future possibility. And that theft deserves to be named and resisted, because you do have a future that does not have to look like your present. But seeing that future requires stepping back far enough from the daily struggle to remember that life is bigger than this relationship and its problems. Now, I have named these impacts not to discourage you, but to validate what you may have been experiencing. If any of this resonates, know that what you are feeling is real and reasonable. You are not crazy, oversensitive, or making something out of nothing. You are a human being responding normally to an abnormal situation, and recognizing the impact is the first step toward protecting yourself and creating something different. Part 8. When silence signals danger. I need to take a moment to address a more serious dimension of this issue. While some silence is merely frustrating or hurtful, other forms of silence can be warning signs of something more dangerous. If you recognize any of these patterns, please take them seriously. The first danger signal is silence combined with contempt. Contempt is one of the most destructive forces in a relationship. It is characterized by a sense of superiority and disgust toward the other person. When silence is paired with eye rolls, sneering, dismissive body language, or a general attitude that you are beneath him, you are experiencing something more serious than simple withdrawal. This combination of silence and contempt is a reliable predictor of relationship failure. More importantly, it is a form of emotional abuse. No one deserves to be treated with contempt. If this is what you are experiencing, your safety and well-being require serious attention. The second danger signal is silence that follows your attempts to assert yourself. If he becomes particularly silent after you express needs, set boundaries, or disagree with him, this is a concerning pattern. It suggests that silence is being used to punish you for having your own perspective. Over time, this pattern can train you to suppress your own voice in order to avoid his withdrawal. You may find yourself becoming smaller and smaller, agreeing with things you do not agree with, accepting treatment you know is wrong, all to avoid the punishment of his silence. This is a form of control, and it tends to escalate. The third danger signal is silence that coexists with other controlling behaviors. Consider the broader pattern of your relationship. Does he monitor your activities, relationships, or communications? Does he make financial decisions without your input? Does he criticize you frequently? Does he isolate you from friends or family? If his silence is part of a larger constellation of controlling behaviors, you may be in an abusive relationship. Abuse is not always physical. Emotional abuse, which includes chronic silence and stonewalling, can be just as damaging. If you recognize these patterns, please reach out to resources for domestic abuse. You deserve support in understanding your situation and exploring your options. The fourth danger signal is silence that leaves you feeling afraid. This is perhaps the most important signal of all. If his silence frightens you, if you find yourself walking on eggshells, if you feel a sense of dread when you do not know what is behind his quiet, pay attention to that fear. Fear is your body's way of telling you that you are in danger. Even if nothing overtly threatening has happened, your nervous system may be picking up on cues that your conscious mind is not registering. Trust that fear. Let it guide you towards safety. I want to be clear that not all silence is dangerous. Many men are silent for reasons that, while hurtful, do not pose a threat to your safety. But some silence is dangerous, and distinguishing between the two requires honest assessment of the full picture of your relationship. If you are in any doubt, err on the side of caution. Reach out to a trusted friend, a therapist, or a domestic violence hotline. Get an outside perspective on what you are experiencing. Your safety is more important than preserving the relationship. It is more important than avoiding conflict. It is more important than anything. Please take care of yourself. Part 9. Strategies for responding to his silence. Now that we have thoroughly explored what his silence might mean, let us turn to the practical question of how to respond. I want to offer you a range of strategies, knowing that different situations call for different approaches. Strategy 1. Name what you observe without interpretation. When you address his silence, start by simply describing what you observe without adding your interpretation of what it means. For example, instead of saying, "You never talk to me anymore because you do not care about me," try, "I have noticed that we have had fewer conversations lately. Can we talk about what is happening?" This approach is less likely to put him on the defensive because you are not assigning meaning to his behavior. You are simply noting it and inviting discussion. It also keeps you honest. The truth is, you do not know why he is silent. When you speak without interpretation, you leave room for him to explain. Strategy 2. Express your needs clearly. Many people, when faced with a silent partner, focus on trying to understand his behavior rather than clearly stating their own needs. But clarity about what you need is essential. Try expressing your needs in terms of what you want rather than what you do not want. For example, instead of saying, "I need you to stop ignoring me," try, "I need us to have regular conversations where we check in about our lives and feelings." When you express needs positively, you give him something to move toward rather than something to defend against. And when you are clear about your needs, you also create a standard against which to measure whether those needs are being met. Strategy 3. Set consequences and follow through. If you have expressed your needs clearly and nothing has changed, it may be time to set consequences. A consequence is not a threat or an ultimatum. It is a statement of what you will do to take care of yourself if your needs continue to go unmet. For example, "I need us to have regular check-in conversations. If we cannot find a way to do that, I will need to reconsider whether this relationship is meeting my needs." The key to effective consequences is following through. If you set a consequence and then do not act on it, you teach him that your words do not mean anything, that he can continue the behavior without any real cost. Only set consequences you are willing to enforce. And if you need to enforce them, do so without apology or second-guessing. Strategy 4. Examine your own contribution. This is not about blaming yourself for his silence. As I have said throughout this video, his silence is his choice, but it is worth honestly examining whether there is anything in your behavior that might be making communication more difficult. Do you tend to react intensely when he does share, which might make him hesitant to share in the future? Do you listen with the intent to understand? Or are you planning your response while he is talking? Do you create space for him to share, or is the conversation always on your agenda? These are not easy questions to ask yourself, but they can yield valuable insights. If you discover something in your own behavior that you want to change, changing it might shift the dynamic, or it might not. But at least you will know that you have done everything within your power. Strategy 5. Get support. Dealing with a silent partner is exhausting, and you should not have to do it alone. Seek support from friends, family, or a therapist. Talk to people who can offer outside perspective on your situation, who can validate your experience, who can remind you of your worth when his silence makes you forget it. A therapist can be particularly valuable because they can help you understand your patterns, process your emotions, and develop strategies for responding. If your partner is willing, couples therapy can also be a valuable resource. A skilled therapist can create a container in which communication becomes possible. But even if he will not go to therapy with you, you can still benefit from individual therapy for yourself. Strategy 6. Focus on yourself. One of the most powerful things you can do in the face of his silence is to stop focusing on him and start focusing on yourself. What do you want for your life? What brings you joy? What are your dreams and goals? These questions tend to get pushed aside when you are consumed with trying to solve the puzzle of his silence. But they are the most important questions of all. When you focus on yourself, you reclaim your energy. You remember that your life is not solely defined by this relationship. You become less dependent on his behavior for your sense of well-being. This is not about ignoring the problem or pretending everything is fine. It is about recognizing that your happiness cannot be contingent on his willingness to communicate. You have to build a life that is fulfilling regardless of what he does. Strategy 7. Consider leaving. I do not say this lightly. Leaving a relationship, especially a long-term one, is one of the most difficult things a person can do. But sometimes it is the right thing. If you have tried everything else and nothing has changed, if his silence has been chronic and unremitting, if you are watching your mental health and self-esteem erode day by day, it may be time to consider whether staying is serving you. Leaving is not failure, it is choosing yourself. It is saying that your needs matter, that you deserve a partnership where both people show up, that you would rather be alone with peace than together in constant pain. Only you can know whether this is the right choice for your situation, but I want you to know that it is a valid choice. You are allowed to leave a relationship that is not working for you. You are allowed to put yourself first. Part 10. Reclaiming your voice. As we move into the final sections of this video, I want to shift the focus entirely to you. Not you in relation to him, just you, because regardless of what his silence means, regardless of what you decide to do about your relationship, you have work to do on yourself. And that work begins with reclaiming your voice. When you have been in a relationship where communication goes one way, where you speak and he stays silent, something happens to your sense of having something worth saying. You may have started doubting whether your thoughts and feelings are valid, whether your perspective matters, whether you have any right to expect to be heard. I want to challenge those doubts. Your voice matters. Your thoughts matter. Your feelings matter. You have every right to speak and to expect that your words will be received with respect. This is not something you need to earn. It is not contingent on being interesting enough or saying things the right way. It is your birthright as a human being in relationship with another human being. Reclaiming your voice starts with speaking, even if no one is listening. Write in a journal, talk to yourself, record voice memos, post on anonymous forums, find ways to express yourself that do not depend on his response. When you practice using your voice, you strengthen it. You remind yourself that you have things to say, You keep the channel open so that when you need to use it, it is ready. Reclaiming your voice also means speaking your truth in the relationship, even if he does not respond. This might seem pointless. Why bother saying things if he is not going to engage? But speaking your truth is not just about getting a response. It is about honoring yourself. When you stay silent because you have given up on being heard, you abandon yourself. You become complicit in your own erasure. When you speak your truth anyway, you declare that your voice has value independent of whether anyone validates it. This is a radical act of self-respect. Reclaiming your voice means setting boundaries out loud. I will not accept being ignored. I need communication to feel connected in this relationship. If things do not change, I will need to make some decisions. Say these things. Say them clearly. Say them without apologizing. Whether or not he responds, you will have stated your position. You will have drawn lines. You will have claimed your right to have standards. Finally, reclaiming your voice means learning to listen to yourself. In the noise of trying to understand him, trying to fix things, trying to get him to talk, you may have stopped listening to your own inner wisdom. But that wisdom is still there. It knows what you need. It knows what is true. It knows what direction your life needs to go. Take time to get quiet, meditate, sit in nature, do whatever helps you access that inner voice. And when it speaks to you, listen. Its guidance is more valuable than anything anyone else could tell you, including me. Part 11. Rebuilding your self-worth. Chronic exposure to a silent partner often erodes self-worth in subtle but profound ways. So part of your journey, regardless of what happens with the relationship, is rebuilding your sense of your own value. This is not about positive affirmations or trying to convince yourself of things you do not believe. It is about recognizing truths about yourself that have been obscured by the fog of a difficult relationship. Let us start with a fundamental truth. Your worth is not determined by whether someone chooses to communicate with you. This seems obvious when stated plainly, but the lived experience of being with a silent partner can make you feel as if it is not true. When you reach out and are met with nothing over and over, the message your nervous system receives is that you are not worth responding to. But this is a lie, and recognizing it as a lie is the first step toward rebuilding. His silence is about his capacities, his choices, his limitations. It is not a verdict on your value. You were worthy before you met him. You are worthy now. You will be worthy after him. Nothing he does or fails to do can change that fundamental truth. Another truth worth recognizing is that you have survived this. Every day in a difficult relationship is a test of resilience, and you have passed that test day after day, however imperfectly. That is not nothing. That is strength. You may not feel strong. You may feel battered, depleted, and barely holding on. But the fact that you are still here, still seeking understanding, still reaching for something better, that is evidence of a deep well of strength within you. Honor that strength. Let it remind you of what you are capable of. Another truth is that you have wisdom born of this experience. The pain you have been through is not meaningless. It has been teaching you about what you need in a relationship, teaching you about what you will not accept, teaching you about your patterns and fears and hopes. This wisdom will serve you, whether in transforming this relationship or in building better ones in the future. You are not the same woman you were before this experience. You are wiser, and wisdom has immense value. Rebuilding your self-worth also requires deliberately feeding yourself messages that counter the message of his silence. Surround yourself with people who reflect your value back to you. Seek out friendships where you are seen and heard. Spend time with family members who appreciate you. These relationships can remind you of who you are, outside of this one dynamic that has been making you feel small. Engage in activities that make you feel competent and alive. pursue hobbies, learn new skills, take on challenges that remind you of your capabilities. When you experience yourself as capable in one domain of life, it strengthens your overall sense of self-worth. Read books, listen to podcasts, watch videos like this one that reinforce your value and provide perspective on your situation. What you feed your mind matters. If the only input you receive is the silence of your partner, that will shape how you feel about yourself. But if you deliberately seek out content that affirms you and illuminates your situation, you create a counter-narrative that can sustain you. Finally, consider working with a therapist who specializes in self-esteem and relationship issues. A skilled therapist can help you uncover the roots of any self-worth issues that predate this relationship. They can help you develop practices for rebuilding. They can provide the consistent, affirming presence that you may not be getting at home. Therapy is not a sign of weakness or failure. It is a sign of self-investment, of taking your well-being seriously, of being willing to do the work that will set you free. Part 12, Envisioning a Different Future. I want you to pause for a moment and imagine a different future. Not the future where this situation somehow magically resolves. Not the future where he suddenly becomes communicative and everything is fine. A different kind of different future. A future where you are at peace, where you are no longer consumed by trying to decode someone else's silence, where your nervous system is calm because your relational environment is safe. This future might include your current partner, transformed through genuine effort and growth. That is possible, but it might also include you on your own, at peace, surrounded by other forms of connection and love. Or it might include a different partner, someone who is capable of the communication and engagement you have always deserved. Whatever form this future takes, I want you to know that it is possible. You are not trapped. You are not stuck. You are not doomed to live the rest of your life in the shadow of someone else's silence. The future is not fixed. It is being created in every moment by the choices you make and the actions you take. And you have more power over your future than you may currently believe. Let me tell you about women I have seen who came to this work feeling hopeless and trapped. They were just like you, living with silent partners, questioning their worth, unable to see a way forward. And they did the work. They learned to understand the silence. They developed strategies for responding. They focused on rebuilding themselves, and their lives changed. Some found ways to transform their relationships. They learned to communicate more effectively, and their partners, confronted with clear boundaries and genuine self-respect, began to change as well. Some realized that their relationships could not be saved, and they found the courage to leave. And in leaving, they discovered a freedom and peace they had forgotten was possible. Some are still on the journey, still figuring it out, but doing so from a place of growing strength rather than desperate confusion. Whatever path you end up taking, transformation is possible. A different future is possible. Do not let the weight of your current situation convince you otherwise. When you are in the middle of darkness, it is hard to believe that light exists, but it does. And if you keep moving forward, you will find it. Part 13. The Power of Acceptance. Before we move to the conclusion, I want to share something that might seem counterintuitive. One of the most powerful things you can do in the face of his silence is practice acceptance. Not acceptance of the behavior, not resignation to a life of being ignored, but acceptance of reality as it currently is. Let me explain. When we are in a painful situation, we often spend enormous energy resisting it. We tell ourselves it should not be this way. We imagine how things ought to be different. We fight against the reality of what is happening. This resistance, while understandable, is exhausting. It consumes energy that could be better spent on creating change. Acceptance is different from resignation. Resignation says, "This is how it is, and it will never change, so I will just suffer quietly." Acceptance says, "This is how it is right now. I acknowledge the reality of this moment fully, and from that acknowledgement, I can choose how to respond." When you accept that he is silent, when you stop fighting against that reality and simply see it clearly, something shifts. You stop wasting energy on denial and resistance. You stop telling yourself it is not that bad or that he will change any day now. Instead, you see clearly, and from that clarity, you can make decisions. Acceptance also frees you from the exhausting pursuit of understanding why. We have explored many possible reasons for his silence in this video, and understanding can be valuable, but at some point, the why matters less than the what is. He is silent, whether because of attachment issues or emotional limitation or deliberate manipulation or any other reason. The effect on you is the same. Acceptance lets you stop spinning in the endless cycle of trying to figure him out and instead focus on the practical question of what you are going to do. It also releases you from responsibility for his behavior. When you accept that his silence is his choice, you also accept that it is not your job to fix it. You cannot make him talk. You cannot love him into openness. You cannot be so perfect that he has no choice but to communicate. His silence belongs to him, and accepting that liberates you from the impossible task of trying to change another person. This kind of acceptance is not easy. It requires grieving the relationship you thought you had, grieving the future you imagined, grieving the fantasy that if you just tried hard enough, everything would work out. But on the other side of that grief is something precious: peace, clarity, the energy to build the life you deserve. So I invite you, even in the midst of your pain, to practice acceptance. Say to yourself, "This is what is happening. This is the reality I am in. I accept it fully, and from that acceptance, I am free to choose my path forward." Part 14. What you will carry forward. As we near the end of this journey together, I want to help you identify what you will carry forward from everything we have explored, not just as information to remember, but as truths that will reshape how you move through the world. The first truth to carry is that his silence says nothing about your inherent worth. If you remember nothing else from this video, remember this: your value is not determined by anyone else's treatment of you. Not his silence. Not anyone's silence. You are worthy because you exist, because you are a conscious being with thoughts and feelings and dreams, because you matter in the fundamental way that all human beings matter. Carry that truth with you. Let it become the ground you stand on. The second truth to carry is that you are not responsible for his choices. Whatever reasons lie behind his silence, they are his reasons, his patterns, his limitations, his choices. You did not cause them. You cannot fix them. You are not responsible for them. What you are responsible for is your own life, your own well-being, your own choices. Keep your energy for that. The third truth to carry is that you have more power than you might believe. You cannot make him talk, but you can decide what you are willing to accept. You can set boundaries. You can build a life that is not dependent on his behavior. This power may not feel like much when what you really want is for him to show up, but it is the only power anyone ever has, the power to choose their own response to their circumstances. Use that power wisely. The fourth truth to carry is that you deserve a relationship with real communication. This is not too much to ask. It is not a luxury. It is not something that only other people get to have. Communication is the foundation of intimacy. Without it, you are not in a relationship. You are in a cohabitation at best. You deserve more, and you are allowed to pursue more. The fifth truth to carry is that it is possible for things to change. The situation you are in now is not permanent. The future is not fixed. Change may come from within the relationship, through his growth or through new dynamics that emerge. Or change may come from outside the relationship, through your choice to leave and create something different. But change is possible. Do not let despair convince you otherwise. The sixth truth to carry is that you are not alone. Millions of women have been where you are. Many are there right now. This experience, as isolating as it feels, connects you to a vast community of women who understand. Reach out to that community. Let yourself be supported. Share your wisdom and receive theirs. We rise together. The seventh and final truth to carry is that this experience is teaching you something. It is not pointless suffering. It is not random cruelty. It is an invitation to grow, to clarify what you want, to become the woman you are meant to be. Let it teach you. Let it transform you. Let it prepare you for what is next. Because what is next can be extraordinary, if you let it be. We have traveled a long way together today, from the moment you pressed play on this video, wondering what his silence truly meant, to now. We have explored the different types of silence. We have examined what his silence reveals about him and about you. We have delved into the psychology, the patterns, the impact. We have discussed strategies for responding and truths to carry forward. And through it all, I hope one message has come through more clearly than any other. You are worthy of love, connection, and communication. Full stop. No conditions, no exceptions. His silence does not diminish that. Nothing diminishes that. And now, as you go back to your life, I want to encourage you to take action. Not just to let this video be something you watched, but to let it be something that changed how you move through the world. Take one step today, just one. Maybe it is having a conversation with him where you clearly express your needs. Maybe it is reaching out to a friend who can offer support. Maybe it is booking an appointment with a therapist. Maybe it is starting a journal where you can process your thoughts and feelings. Maybe it is simply sitting with yourself and asking what you truly want for your life. Whatever step feels right to you, take it. Today, not tomorrow, not someday. Change happens one step at a time, and the first step is always the hardest. But you can do hard things. You have been doing hard things, surviving in a difficult situation every single day. This is just one more hard thing, and on the other side of it is the life you deserve. Now, before you go, I want to remind you that this video is just the beginning. We release new content regularly, and every single video is designed to give you the insights and tools you need to build the life and relationships you deserve. So if you have not already, please take a moment to subscribe to this channel and click the notification bell so you never miss a video. The algorithm is more likely to show you our content if you are subscribed, and I would hate for you to miss the videos that could change everything for you. Also, please take a moment to like this video. That simple action helps this content reach other women who are going through what you are going through. Women who are lying awake at night, wondering why the man they love will not talk to them. Women who need to know that they are not alone and that there are answers. Your like is not just a number. It is an act of solidarity with every woman who needs this message. And if this video has resonated with you, please consider sharing it. Share it on your social media. Send it to your group chat. Text the link to that friend who you know is going through this. When you share, you extend a lifeline to someone who might be drowning in confusion and pain. You tell them that understanding is possible, that they are not crazy or too needy or too much. That is a gift. Please give it freely. In the comments below, I would love to hear from you. What part of this video resonated most deeply? What is the silence in your relationship that you are trying to understand? What step are you going to take today? I read every single comment, and this community has become something truly special because of the wisdom and support you share with each other. When one woman shares her story, another woman realizes she is not alone. And that connection across screens and miles and circumstances, that is powerful beyond measure. So please, share, comment, connect. And for those of you who want to go above and beyond in supporting this channel, you can use the Super Thanks feature below this video. Your support directly enables me to continue creating this content, to research the most current psychological insights, and to bring you the depth and quality you deserve. Every Super Thanks means more than I can express. It tells me that this work is making a real difference, and that motivates me to keep showing up and giving you everything I have. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for being here. Thank you for trusting me with your time and your attention. Thank you for being willing to look at the difficult truths we have explored together. You are braver than you know. You are stronger than you feel. And you are worthy of everything you desire. Now go take that first step, and I will see you in the next video.